Bigger for everything, I died for my son, but a girl was born. We asked her to let her know that there was a recession. The daughter unconsciously held the sword in her tenacious hands. The girl marveled at her gaze, and her father added that this was the path she needed to go through like a future princess. It's not unusual for such a little girl. These are the good news about the 5th day of the people. Like my dear father, he gave me the right sword, and at the same time, I carry it with great importance. The girl has had a lot of experiences. The Urfanen Empire and all the power of power was in the hands of important nobles. During this period of time, the world and calm fell. Everyone was in control. But changes struck, fates passed, and those who were against such power appeared. And all the glory was lost in the mysteries of the past. Everything that had happened before was ruined by the life of the ruler. The world has been shaken by even great changes. The infection was baked into a crooked war by the imperialists in the head of the emperor. There is only one option in them to overcome any problems or war. The opponents in the battle for the power of the imperialists were the noble aristocrats. The aristocracy hoped to prevail, and even in their opinion, their very form of government was correct. In the midst of the battle for power, a girl was born in the Martian family, who were in direct confrontation with the imperialists and the Urfanen family. Vaughn was doomed to be a Spascomyceum in the family of Martians and to eliminate the faction of aristocrats. And obviously, like a princess, she's small and obviously wiggly. We started to learn how to behave correctly in Rosmova, how you need to behave in public. She adopted the manners of an aristocratic princess. She also acquired skills in proper dining etiquette. Also, from her childhood, she learned how to carefully select items and accessories. Viko Vuyuchi asked the lady. And we didn't forget about the skills of using a keyboard. That's a paper robot, that robot with important documents. All these are unknown meanings for the future princess. The girl was faced with a fierce struggle, and her fencing skills were not lost. Everything was not enough, but she had no right to miss. All these are the basics and requirements for the matriarchy. She trained really hard. It took a lot of energy, but it was unnecessary. An important fate awaited us, and it was not enough to deceive ourselves and those who were absent. The main enemy of the girl, the former prince, was the descendant of the Urfanen family, on the name of Siratica Tir Urfanen, whose life had little to do with her life. At the end of the day, the recession is small for the prince of the Urfanen Empire. The fate has come, the girl is already small, all the necessary skills are necessary or appropriate to accept. Dad called her to Rosmova. After seeing how her daughter grew up, she told her that she was ready to declare about herself. The princess grew up quickly and became a very beautiful and intelligent princess and a strong, fearless warrior. And on any battlefield she was ready to overcome. Father added that today marks the 10th day of the prince's nuptials, being the young princess's first birthday, and this is the perfect moment to first come into the world and visit his palace. The girl herself is there and may be ahead of the prince. Vaughn didn't know how he looked, but she knew in a sing-song voice that she couldn't allow herself to be ruined by her dad. Even though father couldn't quite comprehend this, he couldn't help but remind Beatrice that everything could go through thoroughly, and her daughter could only calmly care for her father. Beatrice realized that the end of the ball would begin, and their struggles, to what they had been preparing for all of their lives, did not depend on what she wanted. The girl has a small, glamorous look, having arrived at the ball before the palace, in a stunning purple cloth with a lively look and a prank. Look at all the guests of the ball before you. The guests of the ball marveled at the princess, and the heads praised her right in fencing, seeming that she had the right to tell for the lads of her century. But they could not see any result that could be achieved in the future. Beatrice herself was not at all boring, and it was a shame that the prince was still missing, and the prospect of standing the whole evening, like a doll for those who are absent, was still not quiet. Come on, there was silence in the hall. The gentlemen and gentlemen said, "Cheer up to your majesty, the crown prince." Everyone froze in awe of the prince, having forgotten that they had given birth before. She began to wash herself. The princess first encouraged the prince. The vines have all their beauty, captivating the hearts and thoughts of the guests of the ball. Like the main gate of this life, Siratica Tir Urfanen, this is what I have been preparing my whole life for, just like I did. The struggle for power was officially open. She was amazed that the lady had not forgotten to curtsy. It would be better to cover it up so that she would allow herself to earn such a favor. The prince also wanted to pamper his supergirl by allowing himself to give her one glance. There was no emotion in his face at that moment. Ale vin movchki proishov pozne. So Nibi for Nogotsebula is primarily a guest, not a meta. With each other, their shares will change more than once. With pale skin, wide, bright blue eyes like pearls, and brilliantly silver hair. Standing in front of Beatrice was a short boy who guessed the baby doll, but his very presence seemed to suggest he was singing. Even if she didn't start spluttering at them, she never forgot the real reason for their sestrika. The girl realized that she needed to be hammered in. It's possible that she'll have too much trouble to slip away. Having come to terms with all these facts, the girl's heart sank at the sight of new, unknown emotions. The girls were very happy. And perhaps with this new, unknown visitation, the heart of the young princess seemed to be stirred. 10 rocks because before the recession people received 20 rocks. Having started the coup, the imperialists went into action. In the country, a crooked and bitter struggle for power has begun, with people from the highest castes of marriage and unknown corners of the empire. Every year, Beatrice sat on the underside, the sword was in her chest and passed through. The room was reminiscent of the month of May, of another month. Vaughn was trimming the sword with both hands, and the people who knew it were the same sword that her father gave her on the 5th day of the nation, promoting to themselves that the sword is in the blood of its owner in unselfish agony. The girl asks the wife for liberation and cannot come to terms with the fact that she is giving up her life to the enemy for nothing. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, the princess learns that for the enemy, this was the greatest reward for the battle. She could not give such an honor to Sirotic. Vona is a sucker for surprise. Her heart was filled with turmoil, and after so much effort that she had put into the prolongation of her life, she lost. But it was not inconceivable that, after all, her father was determined to take the throne, but he was not guilty of encroachment. She didn't regret anything. Fighting was the only available choice for her, but still, there was something that didn't give her peace. There you can feel the crumbs. You still can't guess who you might be spoiling. Beatrice, the ice is small. I can't break in, but I'm still shocked, raising my eyes to the mountain so that I can help anyone in this way, and the rest of the night brought her share. When the prince arrived in the room, he looked like he was always going to be timid, and he was clearly in line with their remaining friends. You continue to approach the wounded girl. On this beautiful face, there has never been an emotion like before. The month had cleared, and the room was filled with calm. The smells got together night after night, and they greeted one another. Their host was similar to the host of old friends, and not at all like unbaked enemies. The lad has become virulent to the maiden. It became funny because he called her Beatrice, even though she doubted that if she was just a girl in her eyes, the prince would listen to her. He believed there was nothing to prove, but from his brightly blue eyes it was clear that he had nothing to say. But he obviously couldn't afford such luxury wines. Vaughn continued to tell him that he seemed too arrogant for someone who had lost his way. The princess wondered how she could survive, but be quiet, the battle was won. The prince, furious at the maiden, suddenly sat on one knee. This is not similar to the behavior of the enemy. This behavior is no longer familiar to you. Having admired her, he confirmed that she was the strongest enemy of them all, with whom he had the opportunity to fight. Beatrice was ruined by such a gesture of generosity. She decided to attack the prince by calling him Imperial Highness. The boy corrected him when he said that now there was greatness. It was not surprising, and even more so for everything. The emperor was already dead. The princess passed on her deepest regards to the new emperor. It's quite ironic that she greeted him because she couldn't overcome him, Saratika asked Beatrice, and it never seemed wrong. The whole burden is too small for a girl to go with. Vaughn confirmed that she only worked as hard as she could. She just wanted to welcome the legitimate victory of this fight. The lad repeated that she was a great adversary, but it was even more surprising to hear her words. Vona thought that the stench would sound louder. The princess melodiously wanted to be recognized. Just when she was dreaming about being the knight of Siradaku, serve him and protect him. As if everything had changed, as if it were possible. It was intended that her life would have been like that, and that she would not have been born into a descendant of the aristocratic faction. She really wanted to be born into a special family, Beatrice, already on the border, barely able to speak and choose words, even quietly called to the boy who was already on the verge of Pishov. He turned around and listened to her respectfully. The girl admitted that she deserved their fights, and the boy was completely fine with her. The lad raised his strong hand and placed it on the weary girl's shoulder. This gesture was expressed in such a way that I wouldn't care about the girl anymore. In response to Beatrice's knowledge, she also recognized that their battles had already drowned him. At this moment, he looked as calm and serious as before. The rest that the princess saw before her eyes was the haunting glance of a sworn enemy. Having died her last breath, she went to eternal peace. The young man said goodbye to Beatrice. She no longer had the strength to do anything. Already at every hour she was thinking about her life, how she has grown, what she has achieved, and what she can no longer earn. The movie was incredibly motor-like, but she definitely didn't feel like she was selfish at that moment, so she was waiting for her death. Verniche, that's what she thought. It seems that the girl, in her dreams, feels a voice that calls out to her highness, and when asked, you throw out your words and break up with her. If she opens her eyes, she can't really tell the girl. Standing next to her was a girl, dressed like a servant, and affectionately asking her to share some food with Her Majesty. The girl had not yet come out and could not see her until now. Vona thinks, as a matter of fact, that she is literally guilty of dying right away. Vona didn't believe her happiness, but she was still very happy. If Beatrice sits on the bed, the room again tries to bring the girl to you. All my thoughts are spinning around one thing. This means that she is alive. The princess doesn't know who slipped up and won't. She had a lot of food, but just because she had lost her stomach, it was all that was on her mind. The girl began to look around long enough to understand who she was and what had been done to her. Although it didn't seem like this place was safe, there was a little care. The great mirror fell on her eyes. She jumped up and ran to the new one. Having reached it, the girl could not believe her eyes. Vaughn said that there was another girl standing there instead of her. There is no longer a great Princess Beatrice. In the image, there was a girl with horny, long hair. The room was a light russet color, clean and bright. It seemed that everything was shining in the sun. There were also red Trojans near the room. Looking around the girl's mind, this is the great light of peace. Here are the princesses in peace. While the girl marvels at her new self, the servant does not stop talking to her. The girl decided to turn her gaze to the servant. Vaughn clearly looked ruined. Of course, she spent every day with an unknown person, especially after her death. The chamber appears to be even shaken. She is already swearing about her mistress, asking what happened. Perhaps the girl had a nightmare. The girl understands that it was the very same room that woke her up. The girl thinks that it might sound wonderful, but she realizes that here she probably wanted to ask what her name was. Without realizing it, how stupid it sounded. The dear servant with the stoneflies was quite uneasy about the figure of her beloved ruler. This was evident from her sophisticated appearance. She couldn't believe that the Lady of the Lord couldn't guess her name, and with great joy, she guessed that her name was Shrena Flor Solem. The rest has revealed this, so that it's completely natural to forget your name. Never forgets every day. The girl solemnly drinks salt, and the girl does not interrupt and says that everything is true. Solem, of the name of this kingdom. It's amazing that she didn't know such a land. The chamber takes the lady by the hands and introduces the girl's articles as a guide until her memory returns. Beatrice blushed when she appeared in such a state of disarray. The maid reveals that Solem is a small country, with very fertile land that produces a significant amount of money for the supply of fresh products to the entire local population. With joy in the eyes and ice, the uncontained peace hovered here. With such rich lands, our kingdom has no equal. Beatrice thinks about what she spent in such a calm place, the land of earthworkers. The princess realized that she didn't know why she made a decision and asked. The servant begins to grumble that she told the princess to start keeping a garden so as not to ruin the day and her life. Not being surprised by the burkata, the servant happily announced that today is 10,290 according to the Rancella calendar. Beatrice was delighted, and the rest of the room is splashing around the palm of the hand and conveys that very soon the 20th day of the people's birthday will come, which the girl was so impatient about. The princess is really in shock, and everything is just like Mitevo and Shvidko. As many as 5 years have already passed since Mitya. The princess really appreciates that she came out of her mind, even though it seemed impossible that everything had happened. Their thoughts suddenly came. The princess slept in the room and said just that, but the princess said nothing happened, and the thoughts compared the little girl with a golden retriever. The maid noted that things had changed in her ruler's life when her princess became so calm. The princess was amazed that she had noticed such a wonderful thing. Beatrice thought about the fact that since her food was not given to wonderful concubines, then Princess Shrena was not very reasonable. The chamber forgot about the fact that the princess might arrive for food before Her Majesty, so she screamed and interrupted the thoughts of the ruler. The servant could not believe that she could have forgotten about this, but she cried out with tears. She came in on her own accord. There is no time left to get ready. They need to hurry. The concubine begins to run, pulling the princess with her to prepare her before leaving. The chamber began to quickly brush out the hair of the state, to put clothes on the cloth and to do the combing. She quickly brought order to the princess. And at this hour, Beatrice had one more thought. Vona thought that she had met her end by her own special will, but as if in a magical way, she turned to life. The servant finished her work and the princess murmured. The princess also thought that she had not just turned around, but had been reborn as a princess with blush on her cheeks and peach-colored hair. She could have said that she would have been able to say that she would not have been able to touch the girl with her hands and would not have been able to touch her sword. On her way to dinner from Her Majesty, the princess looked at the window and said that she shouldn't be surprised by the fact that every month the leaves on the trees are green. It's like in this place it's warm for the whole river. I couldn't imagine that such a place could exist. As she marveled at this beautiful garden, the girl filled herself with something she felt, and then she marveled at. It's not surprising that Siaratika guessed. The girl was not very pleased with what had happened to him during the entire hour, and even 5 years ago, the faction of aristocrats had destroyed the whole world. She couldn't believe that this was the culmination of all these fates, that she carried out a wine-making plan for killing him. From that moment on, she fell asleep here, occupying. However, she doubted that she knew about those who turned around. These thoughts could continue indefinitely. Otherwise, she needed to concentrate on the food and make sure not to raise any suspicions. It won't just be that she knows very little about the right princess. As Beatrice walks to the table, she thinks that Lily's all-too-naive rest may not have noticed that she's not a princess, but her family is completely different. It would be more important not to raise suspicion in them than with Pokoi. You will be amazed how long it will take to see her as a princess and then take her for granted. His greatness went up to Shrena without chewing the meat to the end, respecting that the princess was late. The king of booze is in a good mood. Having treated the king, the girl was completely shocked. The king's behavior seemed to her to be unconventional, but she was, after all, a royal person. The queen, who sat by the side of Her Majesty, continued to live, but Shrena had not yet become an early bird among them. She was still a child. One of the princesses, the Shrena sisters, added that if the princess had arrived a decade later, she would have been left without soup. The remaining 2 sisters looked kindly. One of them noticed that the girls were lucky enough to catch up, and she wished her a good morning. The girl was surprised that their behavior did not suggest royal manners. She was thrilled that these people ruled Solem, and this predicted the gathering of a bunch of. Beatrice was a little panicked. She patiently and calmly walked away for being late. And in her thoughts was that she needed to pay attention to the fact that at first glance, there might be such a good reception. The princess with such peach-colored hair decided to guess that since it had happened, that they had all gathered at one table so that they could not complete the beginning of Rosmov's work. Beatrice thought that Rosmova might be political, even though her opponent was sitting with a very serious look. As soon as the princess began, the girl became extremely nervous. The girl kicked up and began to shout loudly that the title of Mr. Pomodore would be hers. This unfavorably upset Beatrice, and all others were also not captured. Beatrice was caught in the act of wondering what exactly she felt was wrong. "What kind of title is this, Mr. Pomodore? There are competitions in them." The other princess, taking out a small piece of potato paper, countered her by saying that she herself could take the title of. The rest of the princesses grabbed this hot super chick and rather rudely asked the girls to shut up. Vaughn added what they will achieve with their vegetable competitions. Shrena can't understand why it's hot, why it stinks seriously. While wandering around like a server, I think that I wasted away from that madhouse. The princess saw that the royal family was sitting at the edges of the vast table and sitting with pursed lips and a serious reproach, and people wanted to sit closer one by one, eat a modest tomato soup, spaghetti with tops, eaten with unsalted bread and a couple of boiled potatoes. Beatrice had never served such a simple royal table in her life. Then it hit her like a storm. She realized everything. Immediately everything fell into place. There are no tomato-potato mixtures or sisters who choose the title of vegetables or fathers who are amazed at everything with warmth in their hearts. The girl thought that she was lying there without a license, flying here in the ether, and maybe she could find a twist of some kind of bundle fairy who was supposed to accompany her in another world. In any case, there is little more sense than what happened. The queen noted that Shrena was too quiet to behave, and there was nothing, which struck her as even strange, and did not look like her daughter. They didn't think about it for. She wanted to kiss her why the girl behaved so quietly and calmly, and didn't eat anything. Maybe she wasn't hungry. The king added with a laugh that his little princess had grown up in one night. The streamer has become so stately. Ale is still a beauty herself. Beatrice was very smart, and thought about how she could get out of this, and she thought that the best way out would be to sit in serious. The girl, who looked absolutely unmoved, added that she was no longer a little girl, as she had been. Having said that she was no longer small, it dawned on her that something was wrong with her voice. She's too childish and squeaky. She didn't understand what. This made the entire royal family laugh. Everyone started laughing and shouting provocatively, and it seemed as if she hadn't slipped up yet. The princesses guessed that she was a peach of the past fate, which also made her very angry. She was completely shocked. She didn't believe that this could happen. It didn't cross my mind that if the princess were noble, she could give such a foolish title. Shrena Bula was very happy that she fed her sister Kim von Bula, to which her sister assured her that there was no need for her to play the fool, and there was no need to mess with her because she had a beautiful peach. The sisters added that she was wearing makeup that complemented her rosy, chubby cheeks, so that the judges could not admire her. The girl thought that she was taking away this title through the color of her. Shrena already wanted to take back her words and not know who. Having clasped her hands close to her fists, she continued to sit, which could not be lost without the respect of the king kindly noted that their girl was so quarrelsome, and the queen added that it was so, otherwise she would soon get married. Friendship was the only thing Beatrice. The sisters were dissatisfied, and the king said that he was not yet ready to be separated from his girls. The queen countered the Yuma, having guessed that she would still. The king respected what the queen and daughter had to say. Not just one, but the same. One of the sisters added that she could. Marveling at the whole situation that had developed, the girl thought that this was definitely nothing more than the twists of a fairy. Having covered it with her hand, she began to realize that it was all just. The church bell rang. There was silence in the hall where the drinks were taking place. Laughter and joy arose, and everyone wondered why. This brought the respect of everyone. The king and queen are definitely ready to replace the princesses. This sign definitely does not mean anything good. Just then, the butler rushes into the hall. My soul was sleepy, but I was singing out of fear, even hurried to the king's indiscriminate cry. The king, who had previously given up too much fun, became even more serious and calm, having asked Vignon for what was going on there. Vignon began to stutter nervously, shouting that the war had begun, and there was silence in the hall. All the songs were singing, but it couldn't be true. But everything. The butler added that Erfiniansi and his bloodthirsty emperor Sierotica. What a cry of wonder in the homeland. No one realized what was going to flare up like that, and even more so Beatrice herself, her cheeks filled with a rosy blush, turned towards the butler to find out more. At this very hour, Seratika will lead its way to the capital of Solim. The stench will soon arrive at the place of recognition. Beatrice did not believe that she had simply avoided the surroundings, that her most baked enemy was coming to her at the fast pace of unknowingly, singly. The share of them had been one by one since. The girl was shocked that the young prince was honest and decent. The ale didn't look like a decent person's food. It seemed to him that he no longer knew what honor and valor were. Seratika was human, as the princess knew, and looked like a month. In the sky, I spoke calmly and calmly. The girl will remember how she followed him to the one who would later marry him. He would be inaccessible to her. Let's start with such Bajanim. He was a wonderful man, but not a less careless person. Yogos Viraz denounced him, preventing any possibility of his thoughts from appearing. This is the greatest threat. I think people followed him with a pointed look. Liudina, who gradually exudes her lightness, yet this light was so penetrating for Beatrice. The understanding of the fact that it has become difficult for us to take into account until now, as it has been formed during all the years of long. The girl was wondering what had happened to him for 5 years, what had changed him so much. Vaughn did not believe that the honest and respectable young man he was could suddenly turn into a bloodthirsty killer. Vaughn did not understand why he had snuck. It was amazing for the princess, even to rush into a foreign land without any prearrangement. It was not like someone she had known in her past life. The young girl's thoughts were interrupted by the butler, who, no less than apologetic, asked the king what to do next. "I don't know what to check for next time." The king, who had been serious a long time ago, was again in high spirits and turned to the butler, knowing in a sing-song voice what was going on here and could not think that the most powerful Urfinians would be. Just this morning, Beatrice became incredibly angry and was amazed that the country was in the throes of war, and the king was laughing. Vaughn admitted that this is possible due to anger. Alitsi is unlikely to have happened like this. The queen shouted at the king, saying that diplomacy needed more than an hour. The king only noticed that Urfinin had never shown such interest to them. Now the stench knows that it was not insanity. The king said with a smile that in a new way the earth would go from under nothing, and the queen cooked it for him that it was not the best time for such words. One of the princesses in the Duma does not have a nomination for the world of vegetables, and she was already embarrassed by the fact that there might not be any competition in the future. This was definitely important for her. The other two sisters encouraged them that they had started a 200-year-old tradition of their land and would be a disgrace for their entire nation. Beatrice looked like a white crow to the fact that she had not won the competition, but moreover, it seemed surprising to her that at such a moment, the princesses were only thinking about her. They marveled that they were not afraid. It seemed that the princesses did not even know what war was about. Everyone looked so relaxed and cheerful. At the table, I started laughing again. Ale Beatrice did not understand why she thought that there was definitely something wrong with them. This is obviously not a normal reaction to this new thing. Stirring the soup with a spoon, she thought that normal people in such a situation could cowardly out of fear. How could they be so calm in the face of possible death, as they singly know? And perhaps the stinks would have looked more funny. They decided to ask, and they weren't afraid. Everyone stood up and marveled in this direction. The hall became silent again. Everyone marveled at her in amazement. Otherwise, we wouldn't understand our nutrition. The girl said that this is war. The stench will kill everyone until the end. No one will be left behind. Trying to reach those who are desperate, we rely on those who will decide to The king clasped his hands at the castle and wondered a little to the princess that Urfinin could effectively create an empire. It sounded like a virok. The king has added eating potatoes, so the little donut has nothing to wiggle about. The princess did not understand how she could eat potatoes at such a moment. The king learned that it is entirely possible that a little bit will be unacceptable. Otherwise, you will be in complete trouble. 500 fates in the history of the great kingdom Solom is. The girl marveled that through so many fates they managed to save the world. She couldn't believe that the country had such a way of dating. The princess respected that causing death is not the only way to ruin the kingdom. But there are still many other ways to protect the country. The king marveled at the princess and became angry. He wrote to his beloved daughter. The king, out of pride, burst into tears all the time as his little daughter grew up. She's all grown up already. The queen calmly said that Shrena had never been wise in her entire life. Beatrice was overwhelmed by the fact that the king himself was the most vulnerable. He can't cry because his daughter has grown up. Vin is the king, Reshti Resht. In the next few days we may take over the kingdom. Shrena revealed that Urfinin is the most powerful power today. She added that she didn't think that it would be reasonable to just stand back and marvel at what was happening. The girl turned her gaze to the princesses and realized that there was no desire in their heads to bring him. The stinks looked like little children who were listening to an unreal story, and it seemed that the stench had absolutely no idea what was going on. Shrena could not know the proof of her mindless The king extended his hand to the princess, urging her to come out and marvel at what she was calling. It's obvious that she was really scared to take him. The queen stood up at the table and said that it is necessary to love children, but not to give advantage to the squad, spiraling on those who seemed to be so among the people. The sisters had only one thought about the need to change their clothes when the people from Urfinenu arrived. Walk around a little. There's a little. The entire royal family got up from the table and walked away, laughing towards the unarriving guests. Only Beatrice lost her side. Having realized that everything the girl tried to convey to the royal family passed by, she was disappointed, but it did not produce any results. Beatrice froze in shock. The butler kindly asks the princess to follow her family, but she couldn't say anything about it. The princess never thought that it would be possible for Saratic to stay together again. However, very soon they will settle in again. The entire royal family at once left its servants for a long time to face troubles. Yaku no one creamed Shrena without taking it seriously. The girl froze in the bath. She was already cleaned and did not know what could be seen from this squirrel. At this moment, the gate to the castle is completed. There in front of you can see Saratic, who rides on a white horse, and behind him there can be nothing else, and such a hateful yet painfully familiar ensign. The girl hid in the crowd's room. Vaughn stood behind her and checked the docks until the king was surprised to take a closer look. She dismounted from her horse and set off towards the royal homeland, and at that moment Shrena was looking at their sustrich, as if on the approach of a fresh wind. Once upon a time, the girl had the opportunity to be surprised at him, since he would always be so beautiful. It was not surprising, since he had been a pretty boy since. Having reached the attack, Sarotica turned to the king of the food and became the king of Solem. The king looked even calm. Beatrice realized that her voice, having become so deep and when she became an adult, was not the same as she remembered, and yet quite a few hours had passed. The girl clenched her fists and truly realized that everything was real, and she turned to life. The sustrich herself gave her a sense of the reality of what is happening. The king, without suppressed laughter, calmly confirms that he himself is not King Solem. He asked what brought his imperial majesty here. Vinbov Peven, it is not for this purpose, but to take Solem. The sisters, who stood behind the princess, began to whisper loudly, wondering what they might need, rice or fresh vegetables or fruit. The sisters continued to wonder if they were starving there, and did not think that such speeches were being made in such great places. One of them added that she didn't think there was a problem with fruit there. Beatrice, in her thoughts, begged her sisters to whisper so loudly to the one who was already hearing them too much. Vaughn felt bad, because the sisters were not very respectful of themselves. The girls did not show how unsafe these uninvited guests were, and from the princess she knew very well that people could sing for the sake of victory. Ajakoli herself won the belt on the emperor's way. Sarotica became angry and said that he was already amused by the whole scene that had taken place, and in the city for a price, he would mercifully give them a choice. Sarotica, drawing his sword, placing him up to the king's neck and hanging out his mind, either you will come to me, or you will die here immediately. Turning back to the king, having washed, he trusts that he will make the right choice. Beatrice was heartbroken. We were not worried that all these crooked battles, all those nations that we had conquered, could have sunk into something more difficult to reveal. And it is entirely possible that this could lead. The girl began to wonder how warmly the royal family had received her, although they didn't know the whole truth. What kind of people are comfortable? The princess thought perhaps through those who had been the enemy of her entire life, and perhaps through those who had only taken her away. How incomprehensibly for myself, it was already standing in the place of my father who had kidnapped. Sarotica was born with such a princess, but obviously without showing it. In his guise, as before, there was no more confidence. He spoke to the princess who had slept, and what should she say? The princess already confirmed to you what she had to say. She continued to see the princess for a long time, and she reprimanded her for her rudeness. It's not for nothing that 20 rocks began to develop manners. Marveling at him without a drop of fear, he confirmed that she was not pressed to accept his foolish proposition. All the sisters were really angry for her. The Stinks didn't believe the stinks they were making. They were no longer a little child. They were the princess's wife. Yaka was in a mood to stand up for herself. The appearance of the emperor changed. Now he was in rage. It didn't even sound to Vidmov that the princesses of the small kingdom were there. The girl was crying, but she was trying to get hold of her. She knew the old Sarotica, but she didn't know what the current one was. Vaughn was afraid that history might repeat. Staring at her, the emperor became furious with the girl, and it was also similar to those whose unknown fear could not otherwise explain this sweet little girl. The girl yapped at the Yuma, to him that the girl had misunderstood him. He repeats that this was reckless, but the girl tends to accept it as a compliment. The prince brought his sword closer to the thin-necked girl and repeated one popular commandment: see once, shake once. And having added that, as a princess, she will stand up to the emperor, and her lightness will not be worth it. The girl continued to sleep with the emperor, who effectively intends to kill them, as if the emperor had killed them. They were all already dead. I told the emperor that threatening the unarmed king would not bring honor to the Urfinian people, guessing what he himself knows about this nobility. I myself knew that this was so, but still there was dissatisfaction, and having said nothing, there was no response. And I washed the threes a year like this. Beatrice ruined herself. She didn't feel so nourished from the new one, so she was a little shocked and the ice began to seem like it. But luckily they turned it in. The sisters came to their aid and hugged each other. The sister knew that she herself wanted to work with this information. They were angry that she had such high thoughts about herself. Having added that because he is such a handsome man, it does not mean that everything is allowed. While my sister was kidnapping her, she realized that the lady had not named herself Beatrice. As soon as it happened, it made life so much more difficult. This would cause concern not only for the emperor, but also for his entire... The king also barked at the young lad, saying that he looked more like a bandit than an emperor. It seemed wrong to everyone that he could raise a sword. One of the sisters continued to believe that such behavior was the norm. Vaughn sang that as soon as the stench smells in that same perfume, the stench turns away empty. She ordered the great emperor to throw away his sword. He marveled at her, as if he were a fool who would punish the emperor himself. It was effective even after the family. Here everyone stood up for the protection of one another, and so the whole family in droves gave back to the emperor and his army. Beatrice noticed that it is possible that it is not visible, but even after the congratulations, she already knew more than one river. Therefore, there is only one person who can note this. The girl was upset by this behavior of her family, so she began to reassure them that her head was still on her shoulders. Sirotic could understand her thoughts. She had never thought of such things before. The queen, pinching her daughter's plump, erysipelas cheeks, told her that everything was fine with her and that nothing was hurting her. It's all about... The stench really was similar to Kachanat. Mom was bathing Shrena, and all the sisters stood behind and chirped, hugging their sisters. The boy was surprised by the behavior of his homeland and said disrespectfully to him. Beatrice sensed this and was overwhelmed by his loud words. Beatrice said that everything was in order and that she herself would run into this. Having waved, she went to the side of... She decided that the best way would be to greet the guest and introduce herself as a princess should do. The sisters didn't understand why they should bother her, and the girl was too young to leave her position. Vaughn continued to say that they were not planning to kill them, so why not continue Razmov in wanting and not accepted to receive uninvited guests in the chamber. The stench was ready to create an exclusion for the emperor, but despite the current situation, the girl added that it would be better to take the least important option from these two, which the young emperor In the same way, the girl began to put pressure on those who had not yet secured any diplomatic interests at the court. I asked perhaps I would like to arrange a favor just here. The emperor responded to the proposal of Princess Shrena and ordered the withdrawal of the army to his assistant, who immediately The princess was pleased with this decision and asked everyone to come. At this point, she confirmed that she had no intention of killing them. Vona did not know the reason for her decision, but she suspected that she might not need to kill them. Otherwise, the stench could not be created. This meant that he needed salt. The girl could have been so bad. What is the reason for such decisions? It seemed that the stench was not to be felt, but it was definitely... The voltage grew more and more, causing their heart to beat faster, just like on the remaining day of their battle. The king and queen lead the imperial personage together with his assistant around the hall. It's not surprising to pass through the same flower garden as Beatrice. Two sisters came up to the emperor. One of them went ahead and watched over him, and the other had a new look behind the skin of the fact that she looks light and incomplete. Beatrice walked behind and noticed that everything was more hostile to him. They began to feel that they had begun to relax under. Having reached the hall, the emperor opened the small room and entered the modest interior. The room was very bright, without anyone commenting on it and saying that it would be a bit cramped here. Our king hopes that it will be even quieter here. Already in his original cheerful manner, which made the boy a little crazy, the king asked the emperor to sit down. The emperor sat on the sofa, standing up, and his boy's name was Maximilian, and he was a treasurer, looking even more tired and carrying documents with you. A sly smile appeared on the girl's face. She recognized Maximilian as a friend of hers. She noticed that he also seemed to feel out of place. His Majesty having grown up with the emperor, he was too embarrassed to go through such a great and important road to the capital Solem. Beatrice, looking at Sirodic from behind, wondered why he was here. She didn't know her place. The situation was even more. Vaughn did not know, perhaps on the right, that she knew her face, and perhaps through her mistrust, but whose emotions, which were impossible to recognize, did not give her peace. Vaughn wanted. She lost so much of the great spirit in her heart after the war, which for her was the remaining 5 rocks. And more than that, the food she could not give to. Without even guessing, the emperor wants to know why he came here. Ask your treasurer for documents for the king. Maximilian gets along very well and very sensitively submits documents to the king of the tension and further grows. It seems that everyone who was in the room has become confused. Having handed over the documents to the king, Maximilian voices what Erfinen believes Solimo to be. The monarch begins to read the contract. Summon all those contracts that impose on the powers that be in even unpleasant minds. The girl is not convinced that the kingdom may lose its permanent legacy after its end. The girl will guess this unforgettable meal and how unique this family is. Here everyone is happy and calm, and the joy that they wanted was so lost in a way. It seemed that since this contract was supposed to change this wonderful homeland, it was entirely possible for them to begin to hate Sarat. Von Nastlika was very tired of Maybutna, so they didn't tell the emperor not to take his eyes off her. The young princess is deeply surprised. Having noticed the stink, they sat there, unable to marvel at it. She didn't raise her eyes to anyone. She tried to get a good look, but she didn't notice anything. It seemed wonderful. It was completely different from anyone else. His look was so penetrating, it would make her fall asleep. When the emperor dares to acknowledge the unmanageable silence of the washed-up Princess Shrena, 3 rubles are made. With a slight smile, without completing his speech. The girl shuddered as if she was unfitted, and she seemed to be shaking. Guessing what was on the right, in a tremulous voice I tried to cluck from him. With whom I looked like this, otherwise I would have wasted my svidomosti. A chuckle appeared in his face. He put his hand on his cheek and continued to watch out for the dirty girl and away. And from the stench, sitting and marveling alone in a new sly chuckle, without understanding what's on the right, it's become even worse for the girl. The king will tell you after reading the contract. Everyone was blinded by the verdict of the king and what would be their. The king joyfully shouted that even after all, everyone who was in the dark could see relief, which meant that there would be no problems in the future. Princess Shrena was not a bit pleased that she had proven the Garni of the mines, and even the mines of such countries are even rotten. The girl could not understand that here it seems that the emperor himself brought from himself a whole lot, as he was promoting the Garni of his mind for the sake of pleasing. Sirotica crossed her legs and propped her hand on her shoulder, asking Princess Shrena for help. The little ones, having covered their heads with ice, are loudly laughing at the emperor, having drank from the girl who seems to be on the dear earth. You won't know your native land. The girl again had that erysipelas blush, and she was smart because the emperor knew so much about this. The king rejoiced at the fact that there was such a great place, as Erfinen recognized salt as the best. And the queen, patting the king on the shoulders, added that its agriculture was the best thing in the world. The queen began to reprimand the king for the fact that they were threatening the worst time in the entire history of the founding of the kingdom. And you believe that the man on the table is as important as his squad. Shrena respected that there was no time to. Shrena didn't say what she thought. I told them that the stink is absolutely right to be written about, and I give them all the credit. It was confirmed that the emperor confirmed that Solem was preparing 300 units for the entire volume of supplies on the continent. At this point, the sisters began to laugh, confirming that they had never heard of such statistics, but that they were even more encouraging. Similarly, one sister added that the first person was the one who killed her in this respect. Most people only valued gold and value. Although the royal homeland and quite a few exact numbers, they knew that the stench was very strong. Shrena was in her thoughts. She guessed that Solem, which she saw on the map, was even smaller. It was a shame that they achieved such a result, even if she never heard of their land when she was a princess. Serotica added that the local population, the descendants of the Great Temple. Moreover, Solima has everything with a magical order of growth, and having recently added that the people here are the first priests of the earthly deity, the stench is itself a miracle in its nature. This is the The boy looked like a cunning fox, and his laugh showed that he had just thought about it, but he just tisked at the princess and immediately made the story clear to the people. The girl was hostilely surprised at no one, not understanding why she could hear the boy staring at her. Having said that there will be a speck of uncertainty in the eyes of the princess, Vaughn began to worry. She became confused, but in her head she didn't understand that she knew so much about the history of this people, as she only learned about her birth. The princess seemed even more dejected that the emperor treated her like a little child, and having known the truth, it is my honor to speak with him. The king wanted to kiss the emperor, which is why it was necessary to earn so much money. Aja, you thought it was even more. The king continued to speak out about what Solem had long ago thought, and tisked that the emperor would benefit from it. The boy sat thoughtfully and listened to the king. The emperor strokes his army of soldiers, who are all on the right side of the charmer. He looked calm, but in the middle there was definitely no calm. The boy survived, which may be unknown to them, and Solem, concentrating on himself the respect of all powerful powers, the first of them were the enchanters. The enchanters were entrusted to the holy power of Solem. Yaksho, Solem, the king and queen were shaken by this new thing. The queen allowed herself to be swayed into something more effective than the creation's aim at them, why they are so dangerous. The king thought about the proposition and respected that the contract is too one-sided. It's not clear to the emperor, it's not clear to anyone. The emperor happily told her that the king wanted them to be exploited, then they can't say anything about it. The boy, not understanding why, screams dissatisfaction. The king was planning a contract for a friend and not for a controlled kingdom. Alvin nevertheless decided to seize. Tribute maker Maximilian confirmed to the king that he was absolutely right when he slammed his foot on the ground. Their actions were not understood by the monarch, and he continued to say that when the contract was created, Solem was seen more as a friend and an ally. Having respected that you have signed this agreement, in the coming 20 years, Solem can be invested in supporting Urfanin. So since Solem will be their first land emperor, a dozen additional provisions will appear in connection with the changes, but they will be executed in such a way that they will no longer smell the same. Until then, the emperor sat and listened to his assistant, who completed his thought by adding that there would be no important rush to the country. The kings and queens began to communicate one-on-one. The stench was restless and they did not feel such unraveling. As the emperor had already added, there was no longer any reason to doubt whether our minds were more or less palatable. All the charisma of the emperor in all its glory went to work. We added that as Emperor Urfaninu we can guarantee their security and peace. Shrowena marveled at what had happened and understood. On the right was that Solem Raptovo became the center of political interest. The girl knew that it was all because the country wanted a little bit of riches and stink, just wanted to take it away before everyone else. Those who stink show their Zakist is not happy to fall into disrepair. The girl, who looked gloomy, realized that in exchange for the occupation of the sacred lands given to them by the gods, they are exaggerating their cunningness. She marveled at Maximilian and thought that he hadn't changed a bit. You've lost yourself to a sly fox who will always find. It became clear that she was on the right, and Shrowena was collecting all the facts of the purchase, and I could steal her new developments from the people from the graveyard. The girl from another corner of the room allowed herself to notice that the emperor was already in a hurry to get out, allowing herself to admit that the Chakluns began to act before the emperor had recovered. The boy marveled at her, and again a most wonderful laugh appeared, the likes of which he had never seen before. You know, she's right. The princess didn't understand why he was staring at her all day long. Maybe it would be nice for him to work. Alec definitely didn't suit Shrowena. The emperor became serious again, adding that the enchanters had no supply of products, and wanted to test the salt for its value and gain divine power. I notice the hunger, the stench of wanting to drown the whole world in chaos." The girl began to argue with him, arguing that they had no reason to trust him. It was obvious why he was so stubborn about them. Vaughn emphasized that they could not trust people who had invaded their land. She waved her sword in front of. They got hold of them because they will be at the bottom through the hasty signing of the contract. There was no mention of what their future actions would be like. The lad again strokes himself according to the selection of his friends, so that she is vouched for the fact that she is not in breach. Otherwise, I'll bleed through. The girl marveled at the stars there may be, so you know that there are only so many of us today. Perhaps he understands everything, but he knows everything. The emperor raised his hands and asked for punishment for those who had appeared at Selima, declaring that they did not know what to smell from the locals. Having added that this agreement is about friendship, which will be beneficial for both sides. Vin bov vepevneni sho perikonav yik yi edze dzomu dzumu busen. Alla Beatrice knew very well that there was no agreement about friendship. She guessed that she knew Sereratika well enough to admit that it would be effective to help someone else's land, so she was singing that you need something else. Ailey, and the disgusting thing is not small. How to transfer from whom all the other even stinks were captured in the form of such a friendly proposition. The king made a decision. Having decided to sign him, you have effectively trusted Seratika and will tell you that you will spend where else if you don't sign him. The queen began to clap at the palm. She was actively happy that she would not threaten anything, and in any case there would be a stink in the carelessness. The friend realized that on their part it would be a fool not to sign this. And even though it seemed that all the tables were unrealistic, they were the only ones taking the emperor was surprised to think so, and in truth this proposition was very good for Solem, but it was not clear to him what he knew. And having decided to add in a new additional situation, he immediately raised concerns about the royal family and informed Beatrice was right. She knew this would happen. The girl was wondering what this kind of thing was. Everyone was wondering if he would say what he really. All of them were blinded by the emperor's verdict. The boy, proudly raising his head, said that this is what the emperor says. Having realized that they wanted to marry a representative of their homeland as a member of their family, everyone was shocked by such an ultimatum from the young ruler. Crossing one leg over the other, he clasped his hands together. But having added that judging from this, there are all sorts of options here. Beatrice was shocked at what she could possibly be thinking. Vaughn did not cover those who wanted to be friends with one of the princesses of Solem. Maximilian was no less shocked by what had also become a disappointment for him. He never felt like the emperor wanted to be friends. That's why the two of them immediately thought that the emperor was insane. Why bother making such loud statements so loud? The king rose to his feet, shocked by such information, and seemed to be in no mood for anything. Even though they all knew how much his father loved his little, he looked fiercely and asked the emperor that he didn't feel that he wanted to take one of his beloved daughters from his friend. The emperor sat there for a long time and nothing happened, and said that from infection all the minds of the contract were stuck. Beatrice turned her head and marveled at her father, who seemed to think that the king was ready to kill him, and she was not at all glad to see that such a twist of the emperor could take the king out of himself. The girl wondered what her father would think like he did. It's no good to show up without advance, threaten war, and then force your daughter to marry someone else. Once the king and queen melted with joy, it seemed as if there had been no laughter between them. They were already impressed that their daughters might be able to marry the emperor. Although my father wanted to improve his sons, my mother could not believe that her father-in-law would become. The naughty sisters were already sitting and watching as they began to sing together with the emperor. The sisters began to consider the candidacy of another sister in seniority. Guess what? She was going to get caught behind the cordon. Aleda suggests that it is impossible for Sir Sakum to develop her proposition. You can't just leave someone who can get a faceless super-ichok from your spouse. Another sister added that the emperor was so hot-headed and urged her to go and replace her. It was clear from Beatrice's appearance that she was sleek. A year later, she changed her mind because everything was too fancy for her. So the sister fired at her, saying that only the face of the one she called hot was Beatrice stood aside and did not understand that she clearly knew that her sisters were a little unsound, let alone a little bit. Noticing how Beatrice felt, the boy began to stare at her again. The girl noticed this and began to get angry that he was already openly mocking her. Don't be surprised at everything Beatrice wanted to buy more, because one of them could have been married at some point. The girl was about to anger the emperor, saying that he should show a little more caution when making such important decisions. The boy Beatrice marveled at, seeming completely absent-minded, and began to think that no one else would be in any trouble. The whole homeland gurgled sweetly and laughed. Everyone seems happy with this new thing, but not Princess Shrone. Vaughn wondered why the Stinks would lead themselves like a bunch of... The Emperor made his advance by declaring that, once he has decided to convert a person in any way he will decide his life, then before converting, he can watch over. Before his application, he added that he plans to be away from Solem for a few months. The entire royal homeland was shocked by such arrogance of the Emperor. We intend to get to know them better. It could have been said even closer. Rosviducci was amazed at Princess Vaughn, catching the Emperor's glance at her in the hour of his provocation, tried to figure out why she should be surprised at her in the hour of her threat. That's how all the problems were resolved. Everyone was satisfied with the resolution of all problems. Surrounded by Beatrice, she didn't control. The servants ran and tossed around, enduring the impersonality of the Emperor's speeches. The stench is little to prepare the chambers for Sarotica as it has been seen. Princess Shrowena stood and marveled at how the servants carried tables in their hands straight to the next room of their important guest. The room already looked quiet, not caring that it was... Vaughn did not understand why there was such a fuss. It seemed surprising to her that people who had arrived for 10 months in May would need such a number of speeches. The girl felt a familiar voice, turning to her right hand. She shook her head. Sarotica walked towards the girl and asked her that she was still smart. The prince, looking like this, never became one of the flowers of his garden and blossomed from the skin of the pine spent here. Opening up from the other side, it seemed that he had become more beautiful than before. The girl didn't see the boy here, especially with such a look. She didn't know what to tell him. She couldn't call until she was in charge. A few years ago, things got worse. There was a calm and peaceful world at the castle. The situation was even quieter. It's almost like a rapt has become a bit gummy. This Princess Shrewena knew that she had baked a super bitch with the Emperor because there were many more prospects for making friends in his fatherland. Vaughn did not understand why I should become friends with the princess of the royal family, Solem. The boys are very good at it, but it's true that in the future there are a lot of prospects, even for the Emperor. One of the advantages of the Emperor is to do whatever he wants. It doesn't matter what time. The girl didn't believe that the boy just started to become friends with each other. They were trying to figure out what you really needed. Perhaps you would need... The girl wisely caught herself in thought, but did not dare to finish it. Vona did not believe in those things that she herself thought up. This simply could not be true. The girl missed that perhaps one of her sisters was close to the Emperor's soul. The stench was very strong, but she wouldn't have said that the stench was much smarter. Each of them has its own advantages and shortcomings. Thought Yakala Yi even more than those that it is possible that the Emperor is affectionate for energetic, unoccupied girls. Hungry for her thoughts, she was not similar to Shirataka, who knew 5 reasons for that. The guy the girl knew, without giving much respect to the flirting on the part of the wives, who would not have been beautiful and had a dull stench. The girls made more than one attempt to counter the prince's cunningness. It used to be a crooked statue. Once upon a time there were girls, but every one of them could not turn their eyes away. It seems that at one point, when the girl started burning, she thought that the boy should absolutely... The girl saw the relief of having earned a degree, that every one of these wives who had met before simply did not click with him. It is possible that the smell was all very similar. There was nothing special about them. The Emperor, having decided that her misunderstanding had been exhausted, decided to take care of his rights, since the princess certainly did not mind. He called to his faithful servant Maximilian. That's what he said, and paid attention to the imperial orders. Vin Robiv mustache or wait for the lad. He ordered the deputy to send everyone home without going to the funeral, and also added the requirement to deliver here all the speeches that you might need for a comfortable stay here. The deputy wants to give the order and turn to the Emperor. Aletoi, having crossed the Shi, saying that there is no need for him and what he wants, turning to Erfinenu, so there will be no Emperor, and depriving him of administration without control would be a bad idea. Having made the decision to send him home, the mourner gave honor to his king, laying his hand on the heart of the faithful that his order would be pronounced. And at this hour, Beatrice, who was watching over him, got the impression that the emperor was trying to kill his assistant. Let's go back to what was happening at that moment. The two of them were already standing and watching over it, like servants delivering the emperor's luggage. It seemed that he wanted to transport half of the castle. The girl was extremely dissatisfied with the fact that the emperor was likely to be lost on foreign land in order to convert himself, who had already been named in the land, as he escaped. While the girl was turning over her dissatisfaction in her head, the boy noticed her sawing look, which gained the girl's respect. He turned towards her and said that with his glance, he might have hung the words on his face. Vaughn has raised the idea of depriving his empire for such a long period. The girl was praised by those who noticed her glance. They raised their heads slyly, asking her Solem so praised the share of Erfinin. But it was true that the princess was not even ready to fall in love with him. Marveling at the new girl, she thought about how she really wanted to go to the new one the same way as before, but she was afraid to cross the permissible boundary. The emperor reassured the girl by saying that there was no need to flaunt for 1 month at the cost of nothing for Erfinenu, given the strength of the mighty empire. The stinks will burst forth without anyone's participation for many hours. The boy brought back the respect of the girl who said that she herself had made her so strong, not knowing that the girl is not who she thinks she is and knows more than she recognizes. The authority of the people of the empire actually reflects their special authority. What kind of life is created by rocks of important importance? Everything is not as it was before, because they were constantly watching over other factions, or even fearing that the opposition forces did not take dominant positions in the lands of the empire. Without the necessary skills, you would not have been able to achieve. Marvel at all the Saratica who is now in front of you, even more than a girl, having already changed effectively. Many hours have passed and many lives have been lived. The girl will guess that for as long as she can remember, she has always wanted to place Saratic on the throne of the empire. The girl adds that he is even more of a worthy integrator. And don't be surprised by the succession of your father. This throne will not. She could not help but feel that during this period of time, during which she was still dead, she had missed a lot of important events. The butler approached the princess and the emperor, insinuatingly infatuated with him, in order to say that the emperor's room was all. The boy noticed that now it looks like one of the rooms of his palace, although there was a little space here. The girl was already amazed at how many doors there were behind her. Having become furious with the girl, she again had a light blush on her cheeks. Vona turned her scowling gaze to the new one. Vin Yakovov Yi for those that yawn vibrated him, adding that Tisebula would not stop their sustrich. And the stench may still settle in. Vinov Tisi melodiously like a princess. The girl's heart was already appreciative of his phrase about those who are still looming. Looks like the building there is not ready yet. It was important for them to recognize his presence in their life. Having finished with the boy leaving his chambers, the servants stood in a row and bowed to him, and the little girl marveled at how he was gone. Having lost a lot of power, The girl remembered Erfinin as he used to be before, and with this he is now at the same time. Vaughn called him a garden, which is filled with flowers only, but from his fertile soil. The endless amount of blood of nobles leaked out, like that of Beatrice herself. And not being surprised by this truth, part of her wants to be separated in the splashes of the swollen. It was strange, but walking through the castle, the girl could definitely say that she definitely no longer felt the image on anyone in the past, even though she had driven it in with her powerful hands. The girl thought that everything was so wonderful. The girl remembers how last year, when Beatrice was there, she was actively writing to get behind the notebook. Vaughn told the girls that this is the essence of hatred, and what they learned from the young prince was the most beautiful but of them. That girl didn't understand that it was true. She didn't believe in this lighthouse about the food, she overfed, and the reader didn't have mercy on the wrap. The cashier, with a worried expression, explained to the princess that everything was correct. This kind of niceness is the most terrible of all. Having pressed her hand to her hand, the girl began to think about it, but still did not fully understand what really The girl immediately realized that love and hatred are the strongest form of affection, which seemed to be entrenched so deeply in her without her knowledge, much more strongly than she could have revealed herself. The girl holds Lily's bed in front of her and marvels at her. She always has such a happy look in her. You can no longer put your finger on it. The girl grew up as her ruler, so the emperor ordered a skin treatment from the sisters. The princess was happy with the table and had drunk too much of it. The hireling added that Her Majesty wanted to get to know each other and find out more about them. The princess could not believe that she wanted to go on fun. Her chambers confirmed that it was important to know that she was also one of the princesses. Shrena was extremely excited, and even though she didn't even think about going to get along with Sarotic, obviously the girl no longer felt any hatred, but that did not mean that she wanted to play with him. Guessing everything that happened from the moment of Sarotic's new look, there was a singer who was not at all suitable for the role of one of the candidates in his school. The princess, trying to know the reason not to go to the service, slept at the chamber, as if it were her father's idea to do it and allow her to do so. What her death confirmed was that it was the idea of the king himself to kindly give the emperor a list of the best. The girl wondered why she had gone so far out of her mind, no matter what kind of outburst she had cared about, that it was all just a formality. Having found herself in order with the Sarotic, she was dumbfounded. Before that, she tried to get on top of the fact that she couldn't be bothered. In hindsight, the girl began to become cowardly, and she wanted to tell him that she didn't want anything. Ale was given away for no one without losing respect for it. The girl smothered herself with her hand in reproach and asked God to help her at that hour when Lily was trying to figure out what was wrong with the princess. For now, the girl reassured herself that everything was going to be good. The room became fascinated by the very idea of going to school and began to feel so nervous. The weather was beautiful, warm and sleepy, and birds were flying all over the mountain, and the wind was blowing, and there was magic in the air. Everything was very calm. A short time later, without standing on duty, the emperor went to church with his older sister, taking a walk on this bright, bright day, and wondering how the princesses will become a good squad for you. And after the third day, the emperor was in search of his betrothed, having robbed from 4 incredibly ugly sisters, and Beatrice was watched over by these girls through their bedrooms. The girl looked after the couple, and it seemed to them that it was fun and pleasant for them to walk together. Keeping an eye out for this at the window, Shrena began to see the stench sweetly clinging to each other. The girls began to quickly watch out for this. The entire royal family and the emperor gathered in the garden to drink tea. They were sitting at a small table on the street. The weather was brisk. On the table there was a variety of cakes and tea in them. Tirana was her oldest sister, and 20 years have passed since then. Vaughn slept with the emperor and was granted his own fry garden. The malt-eating emperor praising their fruits, Tirana added to the growth of an even greater harvest of various fruits. Until then, they continued to listen to this undisturbed conversation of Shrine. They thought about the fact that Tirana was the eldest of them, so she was the best option for the emperor. Because she was too young, the girl continued her thought by saying that she was ready to vouch for the fact that the most delicious fruits would not be found here. At this point, Shrena realized that her older sister was being a bit intrusive, and that Another senior member of the sisters added that she believes that the emperor remembers that tomorrow there will be a ceremony in them, and she added that the world did not exist on Tirana alone. I didn't even doubt that he deserved to spend it. Irene was another daughter of the family. She was 23 years old, and she added that it was the same way to defeat the emperor. No one doubted this. She began to be creative. Shrena felt amazing. Even a few days ago, Irene wondered about those in her, Ser Sakum, and kept up with her unlucky lad. Irene is definitely small. It's like the guts of the fact that she was cute just on her own, and from a little while she didn't catch the feeling of being the last of this miraculous trio. The no less important sister stuck out a proposition that informed everyone that she wanted to go to the lake with the emperor. Tiabel was the third daughter of her 21 rivers, and one what the emperor himself thinks about, the only one who fed the boy's thoughts. She was already aware of the fact that she might go to school. She decided to take her tray of quaffs and float smoothly through the water with just one thought about it, and she suddenly began to gain more strength. It was not for nothing that Shrena considered her the most beautiful of the 4 sisters, but she would have an important character and was too balaku. Looking at her mother, Queen Shrena realized that they all had a difference of 1 rick, and that meant that it was important to finish. They were disgusted by the fact that in such a short period of time, they were able to give birth to as many children as it seemed that all people without exception were the first priests of the deity of. Having sunk in her thoughts, the girl also caught herself in her thoughts, that under the rodent stench, not only the soil was noticeable, and it seemed even more pressing. The girl was sitting quietly, slowly sipping her tea, when she suddenly sensed that it had suddenly become too quiet, and she had lifted her eyes. She realized that everyone was staring at her, but she didn't understand why everyone was staring at her. It seemed like there was a stink coming from the tirade fed into her. What was it that her sister had already heard? Today she even streamed, and quietly. The sisters wondered what could happen through those that the stench did not reach them before their conversation. Irene thought that it was because the emperor himself had made the girl so nervous and that she was simply confused. And through this, she so quietly led herself. The girl was shocked by such reckless behavior of her sisters. She didn't need any of her serenadics. Vaughn died so that everyone could calm down in front of her. The stench made Princess Shrena sick, and she kept on muttering. The sisters found it strange that the stench began to bother her, drinking it. And it's true. And the emperor, eating his heart, respected that the young lady seemed to have nothing to do with anything else. This was not worse than the truth of the emperor's deposition. The girl was quiet that the emperor and himself thought differently, and everyone else might have felt differently. The elder Princess Tirana asked His Majesty not to say such things in his direction. Ajewona bula pevna, shotse wrong. She added that every woman on this planet could not support such a hot man like Vin. Irene added to her heart that Shrena is just a little bit sarcastic, and Shrena wanted to go to her room and continue reading the book. Ale bula vimushena vid povistivim. Vaughn said that she didn't want to respect everyone and spend a good hour with the emperor, and that's all. The girl understood that the emperor did not want to make his bride-to-be hate him. It was not a good idea for him to announce his candidacy. The emperor, furious, kissed the girl because the girl was not understanding his food. They sat quietly watching one-on-one. Saratika thought that he would like to look at that same look again if he wanted to drill into a new hole. This made him crazy. The girl thought that her dark eyes and her penetrating gaze were her weakness. Ochima Vaughn could not stand in front of Tsimi. The stench looked so pure and innocent, it was important to realize that the stench that followed people was so cruelly driven into the hands of almost no innocent people. And again their lobes intertwined exactly like their first squirrels. While at the castle at the ball, the girl accidentally guessed the same thing. The emperor repeated his request, but also in a different way, asking that this dirty princess herself was going to work in his job, adding that the reaction of the princess only increased his interest. Beatrice did not deserve that she could tell where to go, that she told him that they should go wherever the emperor himself wanted. He thought that Shroini's voice would bother him. The emperor respects all the fun, but not the girl. There, holding a cup of tea in her hands, it's not for her. Vaughn was hoping that she might change the boy's mind. All the sisters were carefully guarding the bet, and they inadvertently shouted at the need to bring popcorn, and it seemed like a love drama was brewing here. Saratika, having slept with a girl, may turn to the place of carrying out their treatment, as if Solem is completely unknown to me. Having also added that we will be the princess, it's not worth it. The princess showed with all her looks that she was not satisfied. A sly smile appeared on the boy's face, as if he were also on fire, so as not to turn into a girl in the morning after his ordeal. Shrena didn't understand the thoughts in her head. The girl confirmed to you that she was not close to the soul with enough mediocre humor. The lad Vajhav that the heat of the bove will not be spoiled too much. Placing her hand on the table, the girl added that it's rare for someone whose food is not a good friend to go anywhere, and Shov Zagali doesn't like being in the sleep for a long time. The boy, having asked her that she doesn't like walking, she confirmed that the stench is not suitable for her, and she sang Yogo, that the sisters are taking his place as a keeper of respect. But the cunning emperor would not be suitable for such a thing, telling her that since I don't like walks, they should hold their parties near the walls of the residence. He also continued and said that, for example, the girl's room would be a good place. The girl came in handy with him, who suggested to him that this whole idea later became clear, having propagated it to Saratika. Vaughn marveled at Nogo, guessing how hot it was, and imbibed in Nogo what she herself wanted to earn. She was singing beautiful thoughts about him. The girl began to shout at him. What kind of a lighthouse does our father demonstrate that he can't wait to please her and ask her to give him a little respect? All their fathers were surprised and shocked. Having already received warmth and a good laugh, the boy began to put pressure on those that the girl simply cannot bear to see such a garni of propositions. The girl takes her cue from this new kind of lightness. The song is infectious. The warriors on the planet were very similar. perhaps because their childhood was similar. He asks to go into the room before the unmarried girl's party. This time the girl was sung to the tune of 100,000, which is what her father wants to tell himself. The sisters began to chatter among themselves, sulking about the situation in the chambers, and also gawking at the fact that the emperor was too straightforward in winning the respect of the girl. The sisters also added that the young ones in them are very fearful and extremely persistent and can get away with it. It seemed even more romantic to them to reach out to her sweetness in such a manner. Shrena, slamming her fists on the table out of anger, called her sisters brainless chickens and began to become cowardly out of anger. Shrena, in a fit of rage, turns the table over and starts screaming at the whole family, wondering why everyone is so obsessed with love. This effectively made them aware of such negative emotions. Everyone was in shock because it was impossible for anyone to discover such devices from the small Shrena. Tim was even more calm the rest of the time. The emperor continued by saying that he understood that the princess had accepted his proposal and added that he would be impatient to watch their squirrels. The girl looked like that, and at once the anger in her turned red on her cheeks, and her eyes were simply driven in, and she began to scream. Vaughn shouted to someone to stop this godly emperor, at the end of which the emperor stood and grinned, looking very pleased. It was a bright room with golden accents, filled with sunny light. The room seemed even grander and more spacious, especially for the princess's peace. The girl sang a song and kissed the dry leaves of the incredibly hot tulips. The tulips were red in color, and behind them stood white Trojans. Until the end of the day, the restroom occupied itself with questions. Shrena was reading a book. The princess was allowed to serve again, but she continued to marvel at her. Princess Shrena could not concentrate on her book. Vaughn sent her respect to rest, wondering what to note. The lady called to Lily, and the maid quickly turned around at her side, waving a tulip like a tremala in her hand. It seemed that the girl was in a really hot mood. The princess wanted to ask Lily why it was possible today in such a garish humor that the girl was wasted. The girl sarcastically told her that nothing had happened. The princess suspected that her assistant had sneaked into the kitchen again. Having watered her, the maid stretched her legs and informed the ruler that she had long ago stopped doing this, having added that she was on a diet. Shrena asked Lily why she had been woken up, and the girl told her that she had not been woken up at all, but it was the fault of the tulips, and they smelled so beautiful. The flowers are truly beautiful, but the stench does not have such an impact on people. The princess punished her assistant not to change the topic, even though she wondered why she was in such a hot mood. Having bestowed her respect on the tulips, she noticed that the stinks looked very fresh. It was wonderful, even though the stench was not noticeable. Before that, the young princess had never in her life bloomed tulips in such a wonderful red color. Vaughn began to think about what was on the right and thought for a moment and guessed. I guessed what the emperor told her, that the population itself is the descendants of the first priests, and that everything here itself is growing in a magical manner. The girl, having already forgotten about her book, realized that all the first priests of the deities of the earth appear here, and that Lily is also one of them. The princess, having finished reading the book, asked about it. She instilled in all her friends and acquaintances a zeal for farming. The room already had plenty of food, but she didn't understand what was going on. She didn't know why there was such a profit in farming. Vona bula is not vipevnena. The girl told the princess that she had not understood her diet. The princess was disappointed that she did not understand that she herself could not understand so much. Elle decided to explain to the maid that she was a little respectful. Vaughn said that it's not easy for anyone to save a tree alive, much less one that has already been cut. The girl believed that she really cared that they just needed to be planted. Sensingly, Lily realized that the princess wanted to play her, and she had never been so upset in her life. Vona didn't know that Rolina was about to die. Having pressed her thin fingers to her lips, the princess went to her home, which turned out to be true, that she had torn off her skin from the blessed deities of the earth. It turns out that this charming place for the plants is natural and without their constant knitting. However, with the full presence of military force, they managed to forget their rich history and protect themselves from attacks from the neighboring countries. They decided to preserve the calm in the middle of the country without being surprised by the fact that 300,000 of all stink supplies were sent to the continent, and yet Solem lost the respect of the rich powers. The whole thing is just a miracle. Before Princess Shrena came to the conclusion that she was the daughter of the king of this amazing land, so she also had a looming interest in farming. This is a very effective brown gift from the share. And although, as one can say, it was not an original copy, but still it was still in the possession of Princess Shrena. It's not so, but it's completely possible. Laughing, Lily returned to the princess, realizing that she had never marveled at her so much in her life. She added that she had never joked like that before. Lily continued to live with Rozmova and the princess, and today's book seemed so boring. A year later, she added that she might be leaving anyway. The Lady of the Lord screamed for the girl so loudly that she, bouncing around, did not know the reason, and continued to marvel at the princess. The princess, with a sly laugh, asked her that she would tell her why she was so awakened, and that she was going to change those in the future. The girl began to cry, saying that in the remaining hours the princess was so reasonable and careful. The princess was ready to listen to her. The girl discovered that Princess Irene and His Imperial Majesty would rarely go for a walk to the market today. The princess drank too much, thinking that she didn't mean anything, when Princess Irene came up with the idea of asking the emperor to the market. Vaughn wondered why such a person would find it unpleasant to provoke. The chamber added that they went to the market so that the princess could show him a variety of vegetables and fruits. The girl doubted that if nothing else happened, the demonstration of products would be used as a method of calming a person. After whose chamber she asked that the princess did not want to know more. Without checking the evidence, she said that the emperor had bought a bouquet of wild flowers. The princess sat and could not believe that the emperor had bought the tickets, and the rest assured that no one would have thought that such a greedy emperor would appear to the true connoisseurs of the tickets. The chamber was in the grip that such a flamboyant man, as he would become the man of one of their princesses, reported that all the women and some of the servants were going out of their minds. Shrena learned from Lily's words and realized that a person cares so much about how strong his love is for rural products. The girl could not realize that he still deserves Kvita. It's true that the same synthetics are like that again, the girl thought, clutching her dress. Still, it was important that the girl didn't know how to say it more delicately in order to impress anyone. The princesses had grown up in the chamber, and the girls and the servants made pairs. Bets were placed on which of the sisters would become the crowned emperor. Their skin made a bet on that princess who was in order. Ale said that they would be happy with whatever result they had, because they knew that all the princesses had lost their minds in front of His Majesty. The room was written that there was Shroini's servant. She had already smelled the smell of victory, and added that she was a little worried that everyone had gotten sick of her. Everyone respected that Shrena herself might become friends with the emperor. The princess was shocked that everyone was betting on her because she did not back up to win the battle for the heart of the emperor. The servants sang to her that she had nothing to worry about. Try everything you can to help her. The girl was ruined and slept in the chambers of some princess, the most promising candidate, and the only one among all the princesses, did not become the emperor's squad. The chamberlain said that Shrena has no equal in agriculture, but the girl herself had no idea about this. The chamber added that the eldest of the princesses, Tirana, is not very good with even things. In a girl's life, life gradually grows stunted and never ceases to perish. Another sister, Irene, has a feeling that the fruits will always turn out sour, and every time I try to eat them, their stench will seem completely unsavory. And from her remaining sister, Tiabel, plants will always come out with a very unpleasant smell, and every time it becomes uncomfortable with the rich aroma of flowers. Ali Princess Shrena Miss Peach, everything about her is always so good. So that you don't spoil it, the rest will be perfectly filled in the future. The princess began to think that they were talking about princesses and not about busy farmers. The princess was embarrassed by the fact that she had previously been a princess and had preserved innocence in any situation. They decided to humbly warn that such a faction would collapse from the middle. Vaughn believed that she needed to calm down. The chamber added that the god himself commanded this order to Princess Shrena and the hairless emperor of all ages. The princess shouted at the restroom, asking him to stop her. Lily couldn't believe that her princess had yelled at her, and Shrena began to squirm in front of her, saying that she didn't want to betray her. The princess, having seen it, wanted to come to you and collect all her thoughts before buying. Abi continued with Rozmova and Lily to explain everything to her. The girl continued that his greatness is looking for a companion throughout his life who will become the empress of the unconquered lands. Shrena continued with saying that the following joke is called among those in whom the character is strong and special in the family, and that the ability to farming is not to be considered as a mandatory point. At this moment, the princess marveled at the whole situation that had developed, thinking that it might be necessary to consider agriculture as a part of the agricultural sector. The maid adds that it is very important that they love the roses as a promising partner for those who grow them, and that they love them as a promising partner for those who love them. The princess, marveling at the rest, and at what she just said, noticed that this place was becoming more and more divine with a skinny quill here. Shrena turned to Lily and asked her to stop talking nonsense, and added that she had no intention of marrying the emperor. The servant immediately called out and added that she didn't want to go anywhere. The disturbance is trying to bring the princess to you, if it seemed impossible to move her. The princess clearly knew what she wanted and what she didn't want. The chamber began to scream, and the princess herself crawled into it, saying that she wanted to know how her heights would grow in the desert. But the princess didn't remember this. She overdrew what she herself said. The girl became familiar with the story of Princess Shrena herself, and it became clear what kind of person she was. And even at first it seemed that she was not very reasonable, and immediately Beatrice's thoughts changed. Vaughn said that in case of an outburst, she doesn't want anything more than that. In all likelihood, her greatness is no longer the brightest thought about her. The chamberlain shouted that this was not a problem. The queen had already teased her about it. Vaughn explained to the emperor that it was all your timidity and ordered all the servants to help the princess. The princess could not believe what the queen had gotten to, and at that moment the rest of the chamber continued to support her state gift, seeming to get out of everything. The princess turned to Lily, saying that there was no way to go to the right. Vaughn asked her not to do anything stupid, and the maid asked her why not. After the servant sensed the words of the princess, she decided that she would like to share important information with her. The restroom escorted the girl to the room and added that they were not sitting with their hands clasped. The room was filled with quacks. Having added that this was the queen's idea, it will not enchant. The queen went up to the servants and instructed them to lay out their beds in the direction of Shrojni's room as they were about to start the fun. The princess was very pleased with the queen's behavior and did not believe that it was true and was not at all disappointed with her. The princess was not in for a surprise, and the standing room behind continued to learn about the intricacies of their work and let the petals of the flowers go up to the shade of the princess's hair. The princess loses her money, but fortunately she is in peace. The girl is extremely excited about what happened. In the princess's head, she was asking for help from someone who didn't have it. The chamber shouted at the top of the palace and asked the princess to come to you, otherwise the princess needed only those to find her. Vaughn was enthusiastically fantasizing about her and worried about her without knowing what was going on.